to some.
A nightmare to others! Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
But I will give you a message. A message of death!
Oh yeah! Come on,
I can let fucking couch! Make no attempt to capture them. They must be exterminated. Matron, take them away!
Stardust speaks to you.
You will not only have life eternal, but you will sit with the saints among the elect. Now, it is time to keep your appointment with the Wicker Man.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk About ... I am your humble host, as always, the Big Daddy D. David Mabley, and after we finish recording this episode, I will be dancing around, butt naked around a maypole, wearing nothing but a wig. So, a typical Friday afternoon for me, really.
And I am Luke Murphy. I'm very, very scared, and summer is a coming in a hooda sing cuckoo.
Bless you.
You're very welcome.
Now, normally, our Halloween specials have focused on something that was broadcast on our television screens, rather than what was shown at cinemas. Now, previously, we have looked at terrifying public information films from the 70s and 80s.
A 66,000-volt shock killed a boy today when he broke into a substation.
Scary old episodes of Doctor Who.
He died of fright, Doctor.
My dear Miss
I don't
Hawthorne.
care what you say. The man died of fright.
Unintentionally nightmare-inducing school education programs. And of course, the genius that is Garth Marenghi and his Dark Place.
Larry? Are you alright?
But this year we are going to take a break from tradition and cover an actual horror movie for our Halloween special.
Yes.
And what a horror movie it is.
God, we've got a good one. So in the second part of our Folk Horror Trilogy, we will be talking about the 1973 British folk horror classic, The Wicker Man. Directed by Robin Hardy and starring, amongst others, Edward Woodward, Britt Ekland, Diane Cilento, Ingrid Pitt, and the great Christopher Lee. We will be talking about the film in length, and yes, that does include the ending. So, consider yourself spoiler alerted from this point onwards. Needless to say, however, if you haven't watched the film yet, then consider taking this as a reminder to make your own appointment with the Wicker Man. The story of the Wicker Man centres around Police Sergeant Neil Howie, played by TV's original equaliser himself, Edward Woodward, who must have the most phonetically satisfying name in Hollywood history. Which must beg the question, what do you think Edward Woodward would do? You've done this on purpose again, haven't you?
Yeah.
You've done this on purpose again. Alliteration.
Howie travels by seaplane to Summerisle, a remote Scottish island community in the Hebrides, to begin an investigation into the report of a missing girl, Rowan Morrison. Upon arriving, Howie's investigations get off to a disconcerting start when none of the island's inhabitants recognise the missing girl from her photo. Some of them even going as far as to claim that Rowan never even existed.
As he continues to meet more of the locals, Howie finds himself being equal parts offended and creeped out by the pagan-inspired lifestyles of the islanders and their worship of the old gods. This includes some rather odd medical practices, including selling dried foreskins in the chemists and placing toads in children's mouths to cure them of sore throats. Howie is particularly perturbed when he visits the only school on the island and learns that the children are heavily involved in the May Day celebrations, in particular teaching them of the rather phallic association of the maypole.
It is the image of the penis, which is venerated in religions such as ours, as symbolizing the generative force in nature.
Wait a minute, I thought the penis was evil. That's what our Lord Zardos has taught us.
The gun is good. The gun is good. The penis is is evil.
Praise be to Zardos.
If that wasn't enough for Howie, who is a staunch Christian, the locals are also rather keen on having lots of guilt-free casual sex, with a number of copulating couples being seen out in public on the village green at night. They tell dirty jokes. They openly sing songs about having sexual intercourse with the landlord's daughter in the pub. The
Landlord's daughter, you'll never find another. Although she's not the type of girl to take home to your mother.
And the young ladies of the village will make a habit of doing plenty of dancing around bonfires, completely Billy Bollock naked, to increase their fertility. Oh yes, I should point out, this film contains
gratuitous female nudity.
But they are naked.
Naturally, it's much too dangerous to jump through the fire with your clothes on.
I mean, he's got a point.
He has got a point. Howie's suspicions begin while staying in a room at the Green Man Inn, where he notices a series of photographs celebrating the annual harvest, each featuring a young girl as the May Queen. The photograph of the most recent celebration is missing, with the landlord telling him it was broken and that the photographer does not have the original negative anymore. Whilst at the school, Howie checks the school register and finds Rowan's name, despite the children denying her existence. He questions the school teacher, who directs him to Rowan's grave, although she's vague on whether or not Rowan has actually died.
Howie becomes more and more outraged at the behaviour of the islanders, at the empty churches, and at the lack of Jesus Christ being taught at the school. Howie is a man of incredibly rigid beliefs, and he doesn't allow for the possibility of there being other ways for people to live their life, apart from the way he does. Anyone who doesn't share the same religious views as he does is someone that Howie immediately takes a disliking to, and he views them as madfolk and heathens. Indeed, the people of Summerisle are willing to accept that other people do not live the same way that they do, and they're fine with that. But this Christian copper isn't willing to accept that other people don't believe in the same God as he does. As a result of this, he does spend an awful lot of his time practically ramming his religion down other people's throats. A bit like having a friend who's a vegan and keeps telling you that.
Vegans, scumbags. Now, we're not completely saying we're on the side of the islanders here, but it's certainly hard to be on the side of Howie at times. Imagine if the roles were reversed and this man was someone from a faraway land that practiced paganism, coming into a heavily Christian community and pushing their beliefs on everyone he met and demanding that they all share the same views that he does, calling them backwards and weird if they don't. I mean, it is admirable that he never once gives up on trying to find the missing girl, and that his belief is never shaken, remaining a man of faith until the very end, but he doesn't necessarily make for a likeable protagonist either. Indeed, the people that live on Summerisle certainly seem a lot happier, more fulfilled with their lives than the stiff and repressed Howie is. All of this sets the wheels in motion for the inevitable conclusion right at the end of the film, but yeah, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there.
Howie also finds himself trying to stay loyal to his vow of celibacy, which isn't easy when you've got sexy barmaid Willow McGregor, played by Britt Eklund. She decides to also dance around completely Billy Bollock naked, with the intent of giving the sergeant some balls so blue that they could match the rest of his uniform.
You are a terrible, terrible person.
Down with this sort of thing. Careful now.
Right, moving on again. Howie attempts to obtain a death certificate that confirms Rowan's passing, but when this doesn't exist either, he meets up with the island's leader, Lord Summerisle, played wonderfully by Christopher Lee, with a twinkle in his eye and with such a, well, I suppose you could describe it as a pleasant menace. He comes across as very charming, sophisticated, well-spoken, maybe even a little playful, but you just feel that something just isn't quite right behind this pleasant and polite demeanour.
Now, at this point in his career, Christopher Lee was worn down by years of playing Count Dracula and Frankenstein's monster, and he now craved a new challenge. In fact, he was quoted as saying, "I'm very unhappy. I want to do a film without women who look like Barbara Windsor running up and down papier-mâché corridors screaming." He wanted to do something with more originality, and so he jumped at the chance to play the part of Lord Summerisle.
Now, we've spoken about Peter Cushing in great detail and on several of our videos before in the past, but we've not really gone into that much detail with his frequent co-star, Mr. Christopher Lee. So, Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. Born in May of 1922, Christopher Frank Carandini Lee was born into nobility. Seriously, he was born into nobility.
Wow.
His mother was a countess from one of the oldest noble houses of Italy. He was educated in Switzerland as well as in the UK, where he missed out on a scholarship to Eton by one placing. Apparently his maths wasn't very good. His interview for Eton actually was in the presence of M.R. James, the noted academic and ghost story writer.
Wow, okay.
So, in World War II, he served in the RAF as an intelligence officer attached to 260 Squadron as a liaison to the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, which is what eventually MI6 would become.
Wow.
Yes. He was fluent in French, German and Italian. So due to that, he also spent some time tracking down Nazi war criminals, as you do. When the war ended, Lee didn't want to go back to or look for an office job, but his cousin, remarkably, just so happened to be the Italian ambassador to Britain, suggested he give acting a go. He signed a contract with Rank Distributors, and after going through sort of Rank's sort of theatre school or sort of acting school known as its Charm School, he made his film debut in 1947 in a film called Corridor of Mirrors. In the first 10 years of his acting career, he played bit parts crossing paths with the likes of Laurence Olivier, Douglas Fairbanks Jr., Buster Keaton, Peter Cushing. Yeah, more on him later. But obviously that was basically just the setup for his big break in 1957 when he was cast as the creature in Hammer's The Curse of Frankenstein opposite Peter Cushing's Baron Frankenstein. This was quickly followed a year later when he was again cast by Hammer to play Dracula for the first time. In all, he played the count 10 times, 7 of which were for Hammer, and again opposite Cushing. His career lasted over 60 years. He starred in some of the biggest film franchises there's ever been: Bond, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. He's appeared in numerous genres of film. Yeah, he's more well known for his horror films, Hammer in particular, but Lee, like his great friend Peter Cushing, was a tremendous versatile actor, and that voice of his, oh wowzers, he's just an absolute legend.
Now that's what I call solar power.
That's what I call trouble.
You must admit, Mr. Bond, I am now undeniably the man with the golden gun.
Funny enough that you mentioned MI6. He was in fact the inspiration for James Bond. His step-cousin is none other than Ian Fleming. So in other words, Christopher Lee is James Bond.
Yes. And just going on that bit about him being sort of born into nobility, or certainly being the latest in an ancestral line of Italian nobles, he almost actually married into Swedish nobility as well. He didn't actually sort of get married, but he was engaged to a young lady, but he had to go and seek permission to marry her from the King of Sweden. How does that happen? Seriously.
And his past, where he hunted down Nazis, was brought up again, funnily enough, whilst filming The Lord of the Rings. He was actually the only member of the Lord of the Rings cast to actually meet Tolkien in person.
Yeah.
And whilst filming The Return of the King, Peter Jackson was trying to direct him on the part where Saruman is stabbed in the back.
By Grima Wormtongue. Yes.
And was telling him that he'd have to sort of shout out in pain, and Lee told Peter Jackson that he knew exactly from first-hand experience what kind of noise happens when somebody's stabbed in the back. And Peter Jackson decided not to question him further.
No, he didn't. He didn't. I think that's really probably very, very wise.
I seem to recall that I did say to Peter, have you any idea what kind of noise happens when somebody's stabbed in the back? And I said, well, because I do.
It's not, I like that.
It's Because the breath's driven out of your body.
He proceeded to sort of talk about some very clandestine part of World War II.
He used to be in the British Secret Service, whatever they were called, the OSS.
He seemed to have expert knowledge of exactly the sort of noise that they make, and so I just sort of didn't push the subject any further. I just said, well, you obviously know what to do, Christopher, so I'm sure you'll do it great, and he did.
He still holds the Guinness World Record for the most sword fights in movies, 17 in total.
That's pretty good, that.
He played in a heavy metal band and recorded and released a heavy metal concept album in his 80s. And we'll play some of that in the background if I can get away with the copyright. And he witnessed the last ever public execution in France using a guillotine. On top of that, he's played Dracula, Saruman, a Bond villain, Count Dooku, Sherlock and Mycroft Holmes, Death, Rasputin, etc.
Fu Manchu. It's a bit on the nose, but I've got a soft spot for the Fu Manchu films.
I am Fu Manchu. Fu Manchu. It is impossible. You died. Untie the girl.
So yeah, they really don't
make him anymore.
Quite like him anymore. We we miss you, Christopher Lee.
We really do.
We really do.
Upon opening Rowan's coffin, Howie only finds the carcass of a hare. He also finds the missing harvest photograph showing Rowan standing amidst empty boxes, indicating that the harvest had indeed failed that year. His research reveals that a human sacrifice is offered to the gods in the event of crop failure. Howie suspects that Rowan is alive and will soon be sacrificed to ensure a successful harvest, so he intends to return to the mainland to give a full report to his superiors and have the entire island put under criminal investigation. But with May Day fast approaching, time is running short.
Howie returns to the seaplane that he originally travelled to the island in, only to find that it has been tampered with and no longer functions, and that his radio has also been damaged. He cannot leave or call for help, so he has no choice but to remain on the island to try and catch the islanders in the act. During the May Day celebrations, Howie searches for the missing child in every house, shop and boat in the village, but finds no trace. Exhausted, Howie returns to the Green Man Inn for a rest. The pub landlord intends to keep Howie subdued so that he doesn't get involved any further with the day's events, but Howie turns the tables on him. Howie knocks out the landlord with a candlestick and steals his costume and mask of the character of the fool, Punch. Now he can disguise himself and infiltrate the May Day parade. That's the way to do it.
Oh, you went there.
But where's the sausages and the crocodile? That's what I want to know. How messed up, by the way, is the story of Punch and Judy? It's basically about a guy who beats his wife, beats his child, beats up the law enforcement officer that comes on to try and stop it.
Throws his child out of a window.
Throws his child out of a window, and then a crocodile just randomly gets involved as well.
Yes.
And the show is for children at seasides.
Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When the parade makes its way out of the village and onto the cliffs overlooking the sea, Rowan is eventually revealed. Howie sets her free and flees with her into a cave. Exiting it, they are intercepted by the islanders, to whom Rowan happily returns to, showing that she knew about this all along. Summerisle then tells Howie that Rowan was never intended to be the sacrifice. Well, Howie is.
It is revealed that the missing child was nothing but a ruse all this time to get the wholesome virgin Howie to the island, for him and his blubbest of balls to be the actual sacrifice to the pagan gods. A ploy masterminded by Summerisle himself. He fits their gods for requirements. He came here of his own free will. By being a representative of the law, he has the power of a king. He is a virgin, and by dressing as Punch, he is also a fool. Howie warns Summerisle and the islanders that the crops are failing due to the unsuitability of the climate, and asks them what will happen then if his sacrifice doesn't bring the crops back. Will the people turn on Lord Summerisle himself and sacrifice him next year when the harvest fails again? Summerisle almost seems to consider this, but only for a moment, as Howie's pleas are ignored and he's dragged up to the top of the hill to keep his appointment with the Wicker Man.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
And that is the scariest moment in the whole entire film. And the moment when Howie and us as the audience see the Wicker Man for the very first time. We see this massive, great big structure. And it's like, okay, this is going in an interesting place now.
Yeah.
I don't want to know what's going to happen, but I can't look away from what's going to happen. And it's just the delivery. It's Edward Woodward's sort of delivery of all the lines from there. And I'm just saying this now, he's not swearing. He's not swearing, he's not cursing. As soon as he actually starts saying, oh God, oh Jesus Christ, he's not cursing, he's not swearing, he's not looking up the Wicker Man and going, oh fuck. He's not doing that. He's praying.
He's absolutely terrified.
He's terrified and he is praying to the Almighty at that moment in time, because he's just realised, my end is right in front of me here and I can't see any way of getting out of this. I'm going to start praying. So yeah, we don't see the actual structure, the Wicker Man, until the very, very end. So the villagers force Howie inside this giant Wicker Man statue along with various animals. They then set it ablaze, surround it, singing the Middle English folk song Summer Is A-Comin' In. Inside the Wicker Man, Harry recites Psalm 23, prays to God Almighty and curses the islanders for their pagan ways.
We never actually see at the end of the film whether Howie's sacrifice makes a difference or not to the island. We just see the burning figure of the Wicker Man with Howie praying, singing and screaming inside whilst the villagers are dancing and singing. Eventually, the head of the Wicker Man collapses in on itself, revealing the setting sun as the film comes to an end.
Whoa. Now, usually, this is the usual time where we ask ourselves the question: what have we watched here?
What have we watched here? Good Lord.
Yeah. Can we just very, very quickly, before we start talk about other bits and pieces, that last shot?
Oh, it's
we've just spoken about this before we came in and we started sort of recording this. We just watched a little interview that Mark Kilmore did with Edward Woodward from a few years ago, because obviously Edward Woodward has sadly passed away, and they showed that little final shot of the burning Wicker Man, the head collapsing on itself, just revealing the setting sun. That has to be one of the best final frames or final little sequences of any film ever. It is just, I don't know how long they had the camera on there, but you know, if somebody had basically, you know, if somebody that was the person that was filming it, the director of photography or the cameraman, had turned around and said, look mate, I'm 5 minutes past my time here, union rules, I'm going to have to go.
I'm going to have to put more money in the... I've got my car park nearby, I need to put some more money in the meter.
You know, you're taking the mickey at the moment, mate. I've already given up my bloody tea break. There's union rules going on here. We would never have got that. That final shot is utterly, utterly perfect.
Yeah.
And he's probably the best final shot of any film ever made.
It's brilliant. And it's just perfect the way how the head collapses. I think if the head had have collapsed any other way... It wouldn't have been quite the same, I don't think.
No, it wouldn't have been.
That last shot where the head collapses in on itself, revealing the sun, and the sun was in the perfect spot at the time.
Right there, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many chances they would have had to have done that. I'm assuming they got it right on the first take.
Well, they would have had to have got it on the... they would have had to, because they only had one Wicker Man.
They only had one Wicker Man.
They only had one Wicker Man. The kid couldn't go again because they've just burnt it.
But, I mean, some horror films are scary, but this one is simply terrifying. It might just be the most terrifying film we've ever covered on our humble little show here.
Yeah.
And that includes the public information films, which were nightmare-inducing. And it manages to be a terrifying horror film with virtually no blood and no gore at all, apart from a few cuts on Howie's face near the end.
I've described it as an unhorrific horror film.
Yes, because the horror isn't. There's not like a great big monster stomping about, like trying to kill people.
There isn't a slasher going around sort of killing people.
Yeah.
There's nothing like that. The horror is the fact of this. Here's the joke. This guy's not in on it.
Yeah.
All of these people are, and let's see where we go to from there.
There's that sense of foreboding doom, and it's like you're not too sure why there's a sense of foreboding doom until right at the end, and it's like, oh, right.
Oh, okay. The film itself received a fairly middling reception when it was first released, although it would later go on to be an absolute cult classic and become well regarded by critics. In particular, British film critic Mark Kermode became a very, very strong advocate for the film over the years. And film magazine Ciné Fantastique described it as the Citizen Kane of horror movies. Although Christopher Lee would later argue that the film wasn't actually a horror movie.
I know we've mentioned Mark Kermode a couple of times, both on this episode and in previous ones, but there's a wonderful moment on the Culture Show, a series that Mark Kermode used to do, and he's taken Edward Woodward around some of the locations of the Wicker Man. This is like many years after the film, and in Edward Woodward's case, it's like he's not been to these locations since the film was done, and it's wonderful to sort of see his reaction to being sort of taken around those places again. And at some point, he has a bit of a tear in his eye.
Yeah, he does have a bit of a wobble,
and it is wonderfully touching to watch, especially now that Edward Woodward's sadly no longer with us. But yeah, Mark Kermode was always a massive advocate of the film, as he was with The Exorcist.
Really, he's never mentioned it.
Yeah. If it's a film that Mark Kermode likes, then he will champion it, like The Exorcist. If it's a film that he really doesn't like, then he will tell you all about it, like The Exorcist Part 2.
Or Entourage, or Sex and the City Part 2. I
mean, he's got a point with Sex and the City Part 2.
He's definitely got a point with Entourage as well.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ! Oh God! I remember it well.
There are numerous times where the people of Summerisle try to give Howie the opportunity to avoid his fate, whether that's encouraging him to go back to the mainland, trying to tell him that the missing girl that he's looking for is already dead or doesn't exist, or trying to put him to sleep for a few hours so that he'd miss the May Day festivities altogether.
I mean, yes, the seaplane and the radio are sabotaged, but that's only done after Howie's practically told everyone that he's going to bring in more police officers from the mainland and have the entire island put under criminal investigation. I mean, I'm not being funny, Luke. I don't know anything about police procedures, but maybe he should have kept quiet about that.
Well, yes, he played his hand there massively. He is being given the chance to make choices here. Some of those choices he doesn't make would have likely turned out to be rather, well, agreeable, shall we say? You could argue that Willow was tempting Howie to come to her bedroom, lose his virginity, and so that he'd never be, he wouldn't be suitable for sacrifice.
I mean, of all the places where he went wrong, So think as he's been put in the Wicker Man, it's like, think of all the mistakes I've made, and then he realises, do you know what? If I'd have gone to Willow's bedroom, I would.
Sergeant Howie is an embodiment of such early 1970s self-proclaimed moral guardians, like Mary Whitehouse in this film movie. He should have handed out a petition to get Doctor Who banned instead.
Down with this sort of thing. Careful now.
And there's another obligatory Doctor Who reference in this episode.
Splink! 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 Splink!
Nothing has come along since the film's original release that has rivaled it for its strange otherworldliness. It's almost playful and giddy, little twee in places, as if we, the audience, are also being strung along for the ride, much like Sergeant Howie himself.
And much like the beetle that's inside that schoolgirl's desk, there's a beetle being tied to a screw or a nail, and it's going round and round in circles, which is an odd, a bit of a warning to Howie of this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be strung along.
You're going to be strung along. You're going to be running around in circles, and you're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, and it feels like we're being taken along for that ride with Howie, and with the aforementioned beetle.
Yeah, it's basically from the very, very beginning of the film, we're always going towards that end.
Yeah.
The end's not going to change. Somehow, even regardless if Howie did certain things or made slightly different choices, apart from slightly bigger ones from, you know, like not bedding Willem McGregor, he was always going to end on that cliffside, at that Wicker Man. It was always going to come down to that.
The film would become part of modern popular culture. In recent times, The Wicker Man has been burnt at festivals such as Burning Man. In the year 2000, British heavy metal band Iron Maiden released a single called The Wicker Man in tribute to the film, hence the reason why I am wearing this top today.
Oh God, that's a bloody great song.
It's an absolute banger of a
It's
tune.
an absolute banger.
In 2018, a roller coaster inspired by the film opened at Alton Towers, England, which features a 6-storey Wicker Man structure, which bursts into flames as the train passes through it. And The Wicker Man not only contributed to the folk horror / rural horror genre, but in turn it also spawned its own peculiar little genre. This strange idea that England, not just necessarily Scotland, but England is full of these weird little communities with their own customs and their secrets. And all of that can be traced back to the shores of Summerisle. Without The Wicker Man, there would be no Hot Fuzz. There'd be no American Werewolf in London. And there would be no League of Gentlemen. Indeed, the Edward half of the Edward and Tubbs duo is Rhys Shearsmith's bizarre little homage to Christopher Lee's Lord Summerisle.
We didn't burn him!
The film is also helped along by the incredible performances of the cast, in particular Edward Woodward and Christopher Lee, who both go on to say that their performances in this film were some of their favourites, to the point where they even worked on the movie for free to ensure that it actually got made.
I'm confident your suspicions are wrong, Sergeant. We don't commit murder up here. We're a deeply religious people.
I got paid nothing, and I keep repeating that to people, and they don't believe it, but it is true. And I've got the contract which proves it. Anyway, sometimes you do things for love.
In fact, working on The Wicker Man would leave Lee significantly out of pocket, as in 1975 he ended up paying his own way to travel to America to promote the film for its US release. Such was his passion for this film. Lee just knew that this film was going to be a classic in the making, and you could sense it from the very moment he slipped on Lord Summerisle's Alan Partridge-esque sports jacket.
Britt Ekland is also great in this film, not just because of that scene, and I do find it somewhat amusing that both she and Christopher Lee ended up together on the very same James Bond film, The Man with the Golden Gun, the following year. Although it doesn't feel like you're watching Scaramanda and Goodnight on an earlier adventure. It does feel like its own separate thing.
I mean, I suppose the fact that Ekland's lines were very, very obviously dubbed probably helps with that. After all, you know, a Swedish accent is going to stick out a fair bit on an island community in the Hebrides.
Cheer up. Food isn't everything in life, you know.
Indeed, I get the impression that someone at Eon, or possibly even Roger Moore himself, might have watched the film and felt inspired by it. I wonder which scene in particular convinced them that Britt Ekland should be the next Bond girl.
Stop it now.
Now, speaking of arses...
Oh, for God's sake.
On one of our previous episodes, we talked about Sword of Sherwood Forest, and we spent a bit of time talking about other Robin Hood films, in particular Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, where we mentioned at the time that Kevin Costner may or may not have had an arse double for his waterfall scene. Well, guess what, Luke? If that was indeed the case...
Oh, God.
Then Kevin Costner would have had something in common with Britt Ekland, because she does have an arse double in this film.
She does have, yes.
Yes. It's something she wasn't aware of at the time. During Ekland's infamous nude dancing scene, they actually employed a body double for the wider shots, which seems a bit weird given that Ekland was already mostly naked anyway, but the fact that they did it behind her back is a bit shady. Needless to say, Ekland wasn't happy about it, mainly because the body double has, in her own words, a completely different shaped bottom.
I was devastated. I couldn't believe it, because he promised that he wouldn't do that. And the model's body looked nothing like mine. She had this big ass, and you know, in my fan mail, I get this poor woman's ass that they want me to sign every time. And I just send it back saying it's not me, sorry.
There are a lot of songs being performed throughout the movie, as they're usually in the Green Man Inn, around the Maypole, at Lord Summerisle's castle, and finally during the May Day festival itself. It actually got to the point where director Robin Hardy told the cast that certain scenes of the film were going to be done like a musical. So, as a result of this, The Wicker Man is actually now the second musical that we have covered here on the show, the first one of course being The Apple.
Yeah, one of those things is not like the other.
The soundtrack, like what we saw with Hawk the Slayer, is very much its own character within the film. It definitely doesn't sound like the soundtrack for a horror movie. It does seem weirdly out of place, but it also makes the film that more enjoyable on a darkly comedic level, like the use of Mr. Sandman in the Halloween movies.
I mean, the soundtrack album is absolutely superb. The music for the music in the film is absolutely brilliant. It was composed by a gentleman called Paul Giovanni, based off of you know folk songs and sort of old English songs and what have you, and it's wonderful. I mean, all of the music is absolutely superb, to the point that at times Robin Hardy says, right, we'll get some of the cast to perform it, hence the rousing rendition of The Tinker of Rye by Christopher Lee and Diane Cilento.
Yeah.
I mean, the most famous song from his Willow song has to be the one where Britt Ekland gyrates and what have you.
Whilst being awkwardly dubbed.
Yes, yeah, because that's not her singing voice.
No.
That is not her singing voice. Actual fact, nobody actually knows whose singing voice that is.
Christopher Lee's got quite the singing voice on him as well.
He certainly does. That is a really... also, that was him playing the piano.
Yes, yes. So if there's no end to Christopher Lee's talents as it is, he also plays the piano and sings in this film as well, so yes. What a guy.
Absolutely. So what we've got an incredibly iconic and memorable movie. There's something very different and unique about it. There's never been a film like this, ever. However,
or since,
to be fair, no. But the journey to the film becoming such a cult classic was not an easy one. So, like a lot of films that we cover on this here programme, The Wicker Man is a film where some of the behind-the-scenes stories are actually just as engaging as what happens on the film itself. And this in some ways explains why the film has a variety of different versions and cuts available. By the time the film had been completed, the studio, British Lion, had been bought out by EMI, and it was now being managed by a chap called Michael Dealey. Now, when he first saw the film, he absolutely hated it, actually telling Christopher Lee to his face that he thought it was one of the worst films he had ever seen, and demanded that drastic changes be made. Dealey, it is worth noting, would later deny that he made these remarks.
And he sat at his desk. He didn't get up when my wife walked in, which is always a pretty good guide towards somebody's character and behaviour. And he said, well, what do you think of the film? And I said, well, I think it's a marvellous film, Michael. And Dennis said, yes, I think so too, and so did my wife. And he looked up at me and he said, I think it's one of the 10 worst films I've ever seen.
The new studio executives over at British Line wanted to have a more upbeat ending to The Wicker Man. Someone actually, foolishly, made the suggestion that it should rain, thus putting out the fire and sparing Sergeant Howie's life.
Really?
Sensibly, this suggestion was refused. Although the film's iconic ending would remain, Dealey wasn't quite done with it yet. He had the film sent off to somebody to remove about 20 minutes of scenes and cut it down to as short a running time as possible. That cut is the theatrical cut that was packaged as a double feature with another film that Dealey absolutely hated, Don't Look Now, even though that's an absolute stone cold classic as well. So this, I might add, is against the wishes of everybody involved.
Fast forward a few years and the filmmakers remembered that they'd actually sent a rough cut of the film, before Dealey had a chance to butcher it, to American film director Roger Corman. He of many different B-movies, including, to this day, possibly still the best Fantastic Four movie that's ever been made, which isn't saying much.
can't believe you just said that.
Never got released, although it did leak onto YouTube years later.
Yes, it did, yeah.
It's dreadful. It's a dreadful Fantastic Four movie, yet it's still somehow better than the following 3 Fantastic Four movies that came out years later.
They're just awful. Yeah.
In fact, it's funny, isn't it, that they've done 4 Fantastic Four movies and neither one of them has been fantastic. Like it's some sort of really strange running gag that's been going on.
Ladies and gentlemen, the latest in the substandard 4.
The not very good 4.
The rather shocking 4. The subpar 4.
There we go.
Thank you. There we go. You might have just saved yourself from being sacrificed.
No, he hasn't. He's not a virgin, is he? He's giving me a look now off camera. So they'd sent the film to Roger Corman for him to watch through and then provide them with some advice on how to distribute the film internationally. They then got in contact with him to say, right, Roger, do you still have a copy of this film? And thankfully, he did.
It was just as well that Corman had kept this copy of the film, as this was possibly the only existing print, or as near as damn it near it, to Hardy's original cut.
And this is why, ladies and gentlemen, especially to the ladies, this is why men never throw anything away, because you never know, you might need it later.
Oh, we're going to get cancelled for that. And this cut also included loads of lost footage that had been chopped out during Dealey's original Hatchet job, which may or may not have later been used as landfill when the M3 motorway was being built.
I'm sorry, whoa. Parts of the Wicker Man were used to build the M3 motorway?
Yes, legend has it that some of the original cans of footage are actually under the M3 motorway, which was, by 1974, undergoing construction that just so happened to be adjacent to British Lion's HQ at Shepperton Studios. So in a clear out of the complex, several reels of footage from the film somehow ended up as landfill beneath the new road, and parts of the original negatives became recycled and used as part of the overhead pylons. Now, that was the official story. Christopher Lee, on the other hand, had his own theory.
I said, well, how do you lose or mislay 1 or 2 or maybe 300 cans of film?
Christopher quite rightly says it has to be somewhere people don't destroy a negative.
My belief is that it still exists somewhere, and only a very small number of people know where.
Sadly, this was something that was sometimes commonplace in the United Kingdom at the time. Television programmes and even films weren't always archived, and in a remarkable lack of foresight, reels of footage were often destroyed or, in this case, used as landfill. And master tapes were copied over and used for something else, especially if that footage was never used in the finished production. Now bear in mind, this was years before the idea of home video was even considered. Now luckily, sometimes these reels and tapes were sent overseas to be broadcast over there, and these were actually kept safely in storage. This would explain why so many old episodes of classic Doctor Who would turn up in a storage unit in Africa. But that's an episode of this show for another time.
Oh, very definitely. So this then led to an American release of this reconstructed version by Hardy. Now, this version restored the narrative structure so that it's somewhat closer to what Hardy intended. And now it had a very brief pre-title scene of Howie on the mainland, appearing and speaking at a church with his fiancée before he got on his seaplane to the island. Although in order to appeal to the American market, some of the more erotic elements of the film had also been trimmed out. So this 96-minute restored version was considered to be the longest and closest version to Hardy's original 100-odd-minute version. Well, it's a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of an edit that's been cut together from various different versions and various different copies of film, and some of the film bits aren't sort of the same quality, shall we say, and that's why there is that dip in picture and sound quality.
In 2013, European distributors Studio Canal began a Facebook campaign to try and find some of the film's missing material, which culminated in the discovery of a 92-minute 35mm print at the Harvard Film Archive.
And this new version, which would become known as the final cut, was released on DVD the 13th of October 2013, so 10 years ago. It's considered to be the definitive version of the film, even more so than the actual director's cut, if you can believe that, even though at 91 minutes or so, it's actually shorter than the director's cut. Still longer than the theatrical cut, but shorter than the director's cut. The final cut also rearranges a few scenes, very minor things, and cleans up some of the scratches, the dust, the dirt, the colour flickering that had been present before due to the nature of Roger Corman's copy. Each of the different versions feature a number of scenes that are included in some versions of the film, but aren't in other versions, and some sequences are even in a different order.
And to add further to this, there actually have been a number of fan edits as well.
Yes,
which I think this was for the first time that we've covered a film where people have actually tried to make their own edit of the film. The film's biggest devotees have attempted to piece together the most complete version of the film possible using footage from all the previous existing versions. So the one in particular that I also watched was referred to as the Summerisle cut, which can be found on archive.org, and that further cleans up the church scenes and presents Willow's song completely uncut. And with this year, 2023, marking the 50th anniversary of the film's release, Studio Canal have announced this beautiful 4K resolution restoration of the existing footage and a remastering of the existing 3 cuts for a 4K Ultra HD Collector's Edition, which will be released, I believe was actually...
I think it's coming out at the end of September.
Yeah, it's due to be coming out as we're recording this.
Yes.
By the time this video comes onto YouTube, it'll probably be...
It was re-released. It was re-released in cinemas for a weekend. This new 4K version a couple of months ago, ahead of the 50th anniversary. So it was released for the 50th anniversary. We've got a new 4K version coming out very, very soon.
And it's one of those DVD and Blu-ray box sets that are like ridiculously expensive. It's like £60 or something like that.
Quid.
But the amount of stuff you get in there is like, I mean, it's a lot of money, but you know, everything you can ever possibly want.
It looks beautiful. It
New
really, really
artwork,
does.
It does look amazing.
And finally,
oh dear,
just to add a little bit more, there is also the 2006 remake of the film starring Nicolas Cage. Oh, and there's also a spiritual sequel called The Wicker Tree. The sequel it's not really a sequel, to be fair, but the sequel is only really worthwhile viewing if you're an absolute diehard of the original film, or you're just sort of interested cinematic curios.
Poor wee laddie. Hunting him is a game of chance.
You've often said that what you believe in is the natural order of things. The food chain. Cruel or benign. For you, everything under the sun happens because it just happens. That's fate.
I can't fate to be altered.
The remake, on the other hand, oh boy, it's hilarious. But it's hilarious for the wrong reasons, and it was responsible for a lot, and I mean a lot, of internet memes. The film's actually on YouTube. The entire 2006 remake of The Wicker Man is on YouTube. No one's claimed copyright, no one's attempted to take it down.
Because nobody gives a shit about it.
Yeah, no one wants to claim responsibility for it.
Not even the people that made the film want to claim responsibility for it.
Nicolas Cage is comically over the top in this, even by Nicolas Cage standards.
Whoa, so
this is over the top.
So hang on a minute, are we saying that Nicolas Cage out-cages Nicolas Cage?
Yes. If that was even possible.
How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? How'd it get burned? I don't know!
You could even go, you could take that even further and become some sort of infinite Nicolas Cage loop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, okay. None more Cage than Nicolas Cage, playing Nicolas Cage as Nicolas Cage.
The only way that I would ever recommend attempting to watch this version of the film is that if you have it playing in the background and you've got a copious amount of alcohol and a few like-minded friends. That is the only time I would recommend you watch that.
Oh, and only watch it if you really, I mean really, want to see those scenes where And let us not forget this. Academy Award-winning actor Nicolas Cage runs around knocking out several women at one point whilst wearing a bear costume.
What is it? What's wrong, sister?
I've no idea why he was wearing a bear costume, but he was wearing a bear costume.
Oh, God.
And later screaming out this.
No, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Open my eyes! Eyes!
No, not the bees! Oh, God. And somehow we went from this...
Oh, God! Oh, Jesus Christ!
to this.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
And this is why, Hollywood, you don't remake a British classic. Will you ever learn? Will you ever learn? So, yeah, that is, that's the remake of The Wicker Man. So.
Yeah, and I'm telling you now, I'm telling you right now, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. I'm not even joking. Right? I'd rather watch The Virgin Witch again. I'd rather watch The Apple again than watch the remake of The Wicker Man. We are not doing it. This is not going to be turned into some sort of running joke for the next 5 years. Don't laugh at me. Don't you dare smile at me like that. Don't you dare. This is not going to turn into a 5-year running joke which will eventually pay off in 5 years' time. It's not happening.
So you'd rather watch The Apple or The Virgin Witch?
Again, yes.
Or cover another Godfrey Ho film?
Don't push your luck.
Feel like you need to watch it now.
Right. Pub?
After we take Josh on his appointment with the Wicker Man.
For our most glorious sacrifice.
Summer is a coming in, who does sing cuckoo.
Josh, get this robe on you.
We confer upon you a rare gift these days. A martyr's death.
Hello there. Right. So
hello. Sorry.
So you've just joined us. We're just about to delve into an avenue of pleasure and depravity with a quick game of Cards Against Humanity. But
Right,
before
I'm
we
not playing that card at all.
But before we do that, we're going to just finish off with talking about The Wicker Man and what a strange and eccentric and almost playful film that it is. The Wicker Man. There's never been a film quite like it. I don't think there's ever been a film like it before or since.
No, I mean, there's been weird. That has been weird films before, but there's never been something that, you know, from a horror point of view, it's not. As I said, you know, I describe it as an unhorrific horror film. It's all in the head. It's incredibly psychological, but it spans genres. It's not just a horror film.
Yeah,
it's a musical.
It's a musical. It's a horror. It's a thriller. It's a lot of things. It's very difficult to put it into a pigeonhole. I mean, Christopher Lee himself would argue it's not a horror film, and in a way he is
You're not
right.
going to argue with Christopher Lee.
Well, no, not when he knows what someone getting stabbed in the back sounds like in real life. And then when you hear about the story behind the story of how, you know, getting this film distributed in the first place, the amount of problems it went through in post-production.
Yeah.
It's
not just in the post-production, but in the distribution of it and actually getting it to the audience. It's a minor miracle. I mean, okay, we can talk about the relative merits and demerits of the theatrical version as opposed to sort of the director's cut, the director's cut, the final cut. It's a minor miracle they actually got out and people were able to see it in the first place, albeit not in the way the cast and crew wanted it to be. It's not what Robin Hardy wanted to deliver,
but it's probably the closest
it's
that
the
we'll get
closest
to
to what
at
he
this
wanted
point.
to do. And I don't think we sort of actually gave Robin Hardy enough credit. So when we were sort of talking about it in the main review, it's a wonderfully directed film.
Yeah,
It is
beautifully
wonderful.
shot, beautifully filmed and framed. I mean, the location that they picked, it's literally like a tiny village somewhere in Scotland. And it's absolutely perfect because, again, it brings up that idea that in these like little tiny communities, there's things going on. They have their secrets, they have their traditions. There's nothing
kind of makes you wonder what's going on in Balamory.
Yeah. Archie the inventor is up to something with them yogurt pots. I'm telling you, I'm telling you that.
Yeah. Josie Jump?
Josie Jump.
No, I don't think she's as benevolent as you think she is. No.
PC Plod. Yeah, he's seen some shit. And those two ladies that run the shop and cafe, I mean, they probably know where a few bodies are buried, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. What's the story in Balamory?
You don't
Human
want
sacrifice!
to know. You don't want to know. Run for your lives! But it's a wonderfully influential and surreal and otherworldly and oddly playful film, and it strings you along as it's going along, much in the way that Sergeant Howell strung along. And watching it a second time, you pick up little bits and pieces that you wouldn't have picked up originally. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful film.
It's a great film.
I enjoyed, in terms of folk horror, I enjoyed this a lot more than The Blood on Satan's Claw, which was problematic in places.
Yeah.
And I am looking forward to when we eventually cover Witchfinder General, which will probably happen in season 5, provided that the bunker doesn't get shut down or we don't get cancelled.
Yes, which we're still going for it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're still going for it.
Right, Josh is now implying that he wants to get on and play Cards Against Humanity. So, do leave a like and a comment on this video if you have enjoyed it so. Do subscribe to the channel, ring the little notification bell so that you are notified whenever I have a new video for you to watch. And we will see you next time. So until then, I am the Big Daddy D, David Madley.
I am forever Lunatic.
Behind the camera we have Josh Spray.
We haven't burnt him yet.
We haven't burnt him yet, but we're gonna.
I'm sure one of these cards.
We're gonna wind him down bit by bit.
I mean, one of these cards, I'm sure, does say "Burn Josh."
Burn Josh. Crush Josh with a vending machine.
I'm very concerned.
Right, we're gonna drink some beer. Oh, that's quite a fitting one, considering my own current feelings. And we're going to play a deeply dark and disturbing game as well. So, yeah, happy Halloween to the lot of you. We bid you good night, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye all.
And to him boldly say, "Oh, sure my kettle hath much need, if you will pass my way." She took the tinker by the hand and led him to her door. Says she, "My kettle I will show, and you can clout it sure. For catching and flogging is his delight."
Fair maid, says he, your kettle's cracked, the cause is plainly told. There hath so many nails been drove, mine own could not take hold.